Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 85, One Step at a Time. Sitting inside the vile thieving bird's nest, Sunny frowned and clenched his fists. Something unnatural was happening to them ever since they came to the Ashen Barrow. Now that he had remembered Cassie's warning, it was apparent that their minds were affected, making them forgetful and easily distracted. Even now that he knew about it, thinking straight was strangely hard. It took all of his will just to keep the knowledge of the anomaly in his memory. The events of these past few days were still hazy. Remembering something else, Sunny closed his eyes in frustration. Had they really spent mere days on this island? The number of shadow fragments he received from eating soul tree fruits suggested otherwise. It was quite possible that as much as a whole month had passed since the first time they ate them. And their minds were corroded a bit more with every day that passed. Pretty soon, there would be nothing left of them at all. Only empty shells, walking around wearing their faces. Sunny's face paled. With a growing feeling of dread, he realized that there were large gaps in his memory. He could not remember how they got to the Ashen Barrow, and where they were going. Other things, too, were unclear and blurry. Stay calm. Despite how compromised his memory was, there were still ways to understand what was going on, and then maybe undo it. After all, he was able to remember Cassie's warning. That meant that their memories were not gone, just obfuscated. First step, resist the impulse to forget everything again. Not succumbing to the constant pull on his mind was not an easy task, but he was able to manage, at least for now. Second step, try to understand the reason why you were able to remember these things. When Cassie begged him to remember the number 5, she must have already known that he would receive a new attribute. He had noticed the existence of the mysterious 5th attribute as the result, which triggered the frightening revelation. However, why was he able to not forget about the existence of the 5th attribute altogether? What made him so special? Cassie had even said that he was the only one who could do it. Why him and not Changing Star? Sunny massaged his temples. Then, a sudden realization came to him. Doubtless. One of the enchantments of the puppeteer's shroud was providing him with a small amount of resistance against mind attacks. That's why he was slightly less susceptible to the frightening forgetfulness that infected them on the Ashen Barrow. That was the reason why he had been the last one to agree to eat the miraculous fruits. Why he had often felt that things were wrong. He was also the only one who had managed to remember Cassie's warning, even if it took him a long time. Cassie knew about the puppeteer's shroud, and that's why she had chosen him instead of Nephi's. Smart girl. So, their warped state was the result of a mind attack. But who could attack them on this desolate island? The answer was pretty obvious. That damn tree. Looking down, Sunny felt cold sweat running down his back. The soul tree was, in fact, a colossal, ancient and utterly horrifying nightmare creature. If he was right, then its power had to be simply unimaginable. He was afraid to even think about what its rank and class were. No wonder it was able to drain a whole area of the crimson labyrinth of all life. No wonder it was able to survive and thrive in this hellish place. Of all the horrors in this hell, it might have been the most terrifying. Finally, Sunny knew the reason why no other nightmare creature dared to approach the Ashen Barrow. Even monsters were afraid of the soul tree. Except for equally harrowing things that dwelled beneath the waves of the deep, dark sea. There was no way for them to destroy it. The soul tree was just too big, old, and powerful. For a moment, Sunny entertained the idea of setting it on fire, but quickly abandoned it. He would need a volcanic eruption or some sort of divine intervention to burn that colossus down. So, what to do? After thinking for some time, Sunny decided not to be hasty and move forward one step at a time. First, he had to know the exact situation with his attributes. Summoning the runes, he tried once again to read the description of the hidden 5th attribute. The result was the same. He knew it was there, but could not remember what it was no matter how much he tried. Figures. Confirming that it was still impossible for him to solve that mystery on his own, Sunny moved his attention to the Mark of Divinity. New runes appeared under its description: Mark of Divinity, Attribute Description, you bear a faint scent of divinity, as though someone briefly touched by it once, a long time ago. Mark of Divinity, is ready to evolve. Proceed. Not wasting time, Sunny said, yes. Immediately, the name and the description of the attribute changed. The new runes read, Attribute, Spark of Divinity. Spark of Divinity, Attribute Description, every fire starts from a spark. Somewhere deep within your soul, a radiant spark shines with divine light. He didn't feel any changes within himself. It seemed as though the question of whether or not he wanted to proceed was just a formality, and the attribute already evolved back when he had consumed the drop of ichor. My affiliation to divinity has increased. Neat. Although I'm not sure how it might be useful. Was that spark of divinity the reason why he was now able to see the inner workings of memories, as well as some other stuff like the shadows in his soul see? If so, was it a universal trait of all awakened with high divine affiliation, or just his? For some reason, Sunny felt that it was the latter option. He had received the drop of ichor from a being called Weaver, and then became able to see the strings that were weaved through the memories, giving them their unique qualities. It wasn't hard to see the connection. If this was true, did it mean that there were different kinds of divinity? And he inherited a small amount of a very special kind of divinity. Was Weaver even a deity? Every god he had heard about was named in a similar fashion. There was Shadow God, War God. Well, that's it. He had never heard the names of any other god. However, Weaver's name was different. Maybe Weaver was not a deity at all. Maybe he, she, or it was actually one of the unknown. Sunny shook his head, feeling that he had almost allowed himself to get distracted and release the hold on his memory. He could not allow himself to go on tangents now. Concentrating, he looked at his new attribute, Bloodweave. Bloodweave, attribute description, you have inherited a part of Weaver's forbidden lineage. Your blood has been altered and imbued with odd tenacity. So, he would be less likely to bleed out in the future. That was a very nice enhancement. However, it did not help Sunny with his current situation. It was time for the next step. It was early morning when Sunny descended from the soul tree. However, he didn't bring any fruit with him. Walking over to sleeping Cassie, he took her by the shoulders and gently shook her awake. The irony of how this situation mirrored the one where Cassie had told Sunny to remember the number 5 was not lost on him. The blind girl slowly came to her senses and turned to face him with a sleepy, confused expression. Sunny. Why are you up so early? He hesitated, then said with a friendly smile, trying very hard to act as though everything was all right. Actually, I didn't sleep at all this night. Cassie frowned. Luckily, she could not see the sorry state he was in, nor the dried blood on his face. Really? Why? He shrugged. I decided to climb the soul tree and search for some fruits. But that's not very important. Hey. Your aspect ability allows you to see other people's attributes, right? She nodded, still confused. Yes. You know this. Why? Sunny lingered, then said in a carefree tone, can you take a look at mine? Chapter 86, Final Clue. Sunny's thought process was very simple. Honestly, in the state he was in, complex ideas that went against Soul Tree's indoctrination were almost impossible to hold on to. He was already at his limits just trying to remember what had happened in the giant nest. On his way down, Sunny had to bite himself several times, leaving bloody marks on his hands. Sharp pain cleared his mind for a few moments and gave him temporary relief from the constant pull of forgetfulness. Coincidentally, he was already noticing the effect Bloodweave was exerting on him. The bites only bled for a short while, quickly turning into scabs. The speed of coagulation of his blood was clearly enhanced. He also felt more energetic, his endurance substantially better than it had been before. Which made sense. The human body was a system where every part affected the other. A comprehensive improvement of one of these parts, especially one as important as blood, had to lead to a chain reaction of lesser improvements throughout the system. It seemed that he had severely underestimated the importance of his new attribute. Focus, idiot. No tangents. Gritting his teeth, Sunny concentrated on the task. He wanted to use Cassie's aspect ability to learn the truth of the hidden attribute. Her sight was different from his. Sunny could only see the information provided by the runes because it was a default function of the spell. He simply accessed that information with his mind. Cassie's sight, however, came from her aspect. Thus, even if their minds were compromised, it should not have affected her ability to see other people's attributes. She also had a high affinity to revelations and fate. So, there was a high chance that Cassie would be able to succeed where he had failed. Finally reaching the ground, Sunny woke the blind girl up and, after a short conversation, mentioned the attributes. Then, he carefully asked, "Can you take a look at mine?" Cassie was visibly confused by this question. "Can't you do it yourself?" Sunny smiled. "I can, but I think you'll be surprised when you see them." The blind girl hesitated, then shrugged. "All right. But if it turns out that you woke me up for nothing, I'll be pretty upset." "That was not very nice of you." She turned to face him and froze for a moment, as though staring into his eyes. "Fated, child of shadows, spark of divinity." Wait, wasn't it mark of divinity? Huh, I must have remembered wrong. Stopping for a second, Cassie shyly covered her mouth with her small hand and yawned. My memory has not been too good lately. Too much rest, I guess. Where was I? Oh, yes. Bloodweave. Where did this come from? Sunny forced a chuckle. This thing. From an egg. Anyway, is there something else? Cassie blinked a couple of times. An egg? Well, if you say so. Usually, an appearance of a new attribute was not something one would gloss over. But in the state she was in, Cassie's attention span was severely reduced, and her mental capacity was clouded. She just frowned for a second, then forgot all about the discrepancy. Sunny's heart, meanwhile, was beating like it was going to explode. With a fake smile frozen on his face, he waited for the blind girl's next words. They were going to decide whether or not he would be able to get to the bottom of things. And, therefore, find a way to rise from that bottom. With an absent-minded smile, Cassie said, "My mom makes the best eggs." What were we talking about? Right, your attributes. The last one is enthralled. Wait. Where did this? Knowing that there was very little time, Sunny hurriedly asked, "The description. What does the description say?" A bit of tension sipped into his voice. Startled by this intensity, Cassie didn't ask the same question again and simply said, "You've been mesmerized by the ancient fiend, soul-devouring tree, and are being turned into its thrall. Once the process is complete, there will be no escape." As soon as Sunny heard these words, it was as though heavy chains fell from his mind. Suddenly, his memories returned in an avalanche, making him stagger. His eyes opened wide. Only now that he had fully recovered his memory did Sunny realize the extent to which his mental state was warped, how much of his true self was gone, how close he came to being completely obliterated without even knowing that a terrible monster was slowly devouring his mind. An extreme feeling of terror filled his heart. For a few moments, Sunny lost the ability to speak, covered in cold sweat and shaking. "See, calm down. Calm down. It didn't happen, you stopped it. You're back, it didn't eat you." Slowly, he was able to get a grip on his feelings and achieve some semblance of composure. He came very close to the edge, but did not take the last step. He was still himself. It wasn't over yet. They still had a chance. Looking at Cassie, Sunny slowly exhaled and said, "Thank you." The blind girl smiled and raised her eyebrows. For what? She had already forgotten all about their conversation. Sunny was free from being mesmerized by the soul devourer, but Cassie was not. Her memory, mind, and thinking were still compromised. Turning worse as they spoke. A pained smile appeared on Sunny's face. Struggling to keep his tone light and cheerful, he said, "For helping me out just now. Sorry about waking you up so early. Go back to sleep. I'll take it from here." Cassie hesitated for a few moments, then got distracted and forgot that he was there at all. Yawning, the blind girl lay down and covered herself with her cloak. Soon, she was asleep again, happy and blissfully ignorant of the fact that her days were numbered. Sunny watched her for a while, a grim expression on his face. Finally, he turned and walked away, thinking, "Over my dead body." Chapter 87, Plan of Escape. Nephi's was still at the western edge of the island, gazing over the receding black waters. It seems as though she barely moved since the last time Sunny saw her. Looking at her with clear eyes, free from the most debilitating effects of being enthralled, he was able to notice things that he had not noticed before. Nef's hair was indeed longer. Back at the academy, it was short and usually parted to the side. Now silver strands were already long enough to cover her ears, hanging messily without their usual luster. Changing Star's face seemed much thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and a bleak, dull expression. Her usual confidence and energy were gone, replaced by exhausted stillness. She looked as though some unknown illness was consuming her from inside, slowly turning the once radiant girl into a pale shadow of her former self. Sunny suspected that he knew what that illness was. He had known for a long time that Nephi's had a mysterious goal, and that her determination to achieve that goal was nothing short of frightening. That burning desire of hers, it seemed, was strong enough to resist even the enthrallment of the soul devourer. However, while the feelings remained, the actual memories were gone. Thus, Nephi's had been left longing desperately for something that she did not know, with no way to understand the nature of her emotions or satiate them. This inner conflict was the reason for her terrible state. Coming closer, Sunny sat down and looked at Nef, wishing to see her striking gray eyes shine once again with unbreakable resolve. "Hey, Nef." She turned her head to him, not saying anything. Sunny gritted his teeth, feeling dark anger blossoming in his heart. "That loathsome tree. I have something to tell you." Trying to stay calm and not miss anything, he told Nephi's everything that he had found out. He told her about his trip to the upper parts of the soul tree, the giant nest he had discovered, the vile thieving bird spawn and how he had killed it, the strange memory with no rank and type, the new attribute he had received and the hidden one he had accidentally discovered. Finally, Sunny told her about the nature of that attribute, the true nature of the soul devourer, how long they had been on the island, and what they had forgotten. When he finished, Changing Star's expression didn't change one bit. Looking away, she simply said, "I see." Sunny blinked. "I see. I see. That's all you have to say." She glanced at him and smiled darkly. "What do you want me to say?" He gaped at her and clenched his fists. "Wow. How horrible. Good job, Sunny. Say something, at least. Is it so hard to behave like a human?" She turned away, not answering. Sunny stared at her for several seconds, then said in a tired, defeated voice, "I don't know what to do." "Tell me what to do, Nef. How do I get us out of this?" She was silent for a while. Sunny almost assumed that Changing Star had already forgotten everything that he had told her, but then he noticed sparks of white radiance dancing in the depths of her eyes. Nephi's had activated her aspect ability, using pain to stay lucid for as long as possible. Finally, she looked at the retreating dark sea and said, "We need to build a boat." Sunny blinked. "What?" Changing Star sighed and turned her face to look at him. "We've been here, on this island, for many weeks. Our minds are slowly being erased by the soul tree, turning us into its slaves. Forever. However, the process is not complete." He nodded, listening. "What thoughts did the soul tree put in our heads? That it is benevolent and great. That its fruits are desirable. And that we shouldn't leave the island, staying as close to it as possible. The first two commands make perfect sense. The third, however, is not so simple." Nephi's gestured at the vast expanse of black water. "From that third command, we can deduce that the effect of the soul tree's enthrallment weakens with range. And that if we put enough distance between ourselves and the tree, it will be broken." Sunny's face brightened when he understood Nef's logic. So there was a way. They just had to leave the ashen barrow and flee, not looking back until the soul devourer's brand was gone from their souls. However. But why a boat? Why not just run away on foot? Changing Star lowered her head and said quietly, "We'll never make it to the castle on foot. We'll just die. I was too arrogant before to think. Well, it doesn't matter now. It will take many months to go around the crater through the labyrinth, especially now that we don't have the echo. And every day we spend there is another day we risk encountering something that will kill us without even breaking a sweat." She sighed. "We were already lucky to survive for as long as we did. But in the end, no matter how much we fought and persevered, we still encountered the soul tree. This should have been our end. Do you know how improbable it is that we even got a chance to have this conversation?" Sunny hesitantly shook his head. First, we had to have an oracle in our group to see the future. Then, Cassie had to formulate and execute an ingenious plan in the short amount of time her memory remained intact. That plan was based on the fact that there was someone with an awakened armor of 5th tier in our group, one enchanted with the extremely rare mind protection trait, no less. Awakened with the revelation affinity were few and far between. Sleepers with a memory equal to the puppeteer's shroud were even rarer. That person then had to find and kill a great devil. More incredibly, he had to receive an actual lineage memory from it. Do I need to explain how implausible this combination of events is? Sunny slowly shook his head. Nephi's closed her eyes. My point is, if we go into the labyrinth, we will inevitably meet the next soul tree, and even if we miraculously manage to survive that encounter, there will be the next, and then the next. Sooner or later, we will die. She looked west, where the last remnants of the dark sea were disappearing beyond the horizon. But if we build a boat and use Cassie's staff to fill the sail with wind, maybe we'll be eaten by the dwellers of the depths, or maybe they won't pay us any attention at all. It's a gamble either way. Either we die, which is the same as returning to the labyrinth, or not. If we survive, we'll be able to travel 100, maybe even 200 kilometers in one night. More distance than we had covered so far. Sunny froze, stunned by that number. In all the weeks preceding their battle with the carapace demon, they had traveled for no more than 100, maybe 150 kilometers from the giant knight statue. It was a considerable amount, especially because of how hard each step through the Crimson Labyrinth had been. To travel as much, perhaps even more in a single day. That would have been incredible. But sail on the dark sea. Suddenly, he felt very cold and small.